Welcome back to the Retention Edge podcast. I've got Andriy here from the Good Subscription Agency. Andriy, introduce everyone to yourself, man.
Hey, Eric. First of all, thanks for having me on. So, as you said, my name is Andriy. I'm the founder of Good Subscription Agency, and we help Shopify brands grow their MRR. We focus in on analytics around subscriptions as well as the whole customer journey. So, anything from acquisition, effectively subscriber focused website design and conversion funnel, down to post-purchase emails through onboarding, unboxing, upcoming order notifications, surprise and delight, cancellation flow, down to even credit card recovery. So fundamentally, anything that grows subscription revenue, and our approach is the fundamentally transparency and flexibility is what drives long-term relationships, and that is how you build a good, happy, profitable long-term subscriber.
So, I guess to start off with, like, what made you jump into the agency space, and then what made you focus specifically on subscriptions out of the million different buckets that agencies focus on in e-commerce?
Yeah, great question. So when I started this agency in 2020, I just saw subscriptions as a small and interesting niche that was kind of underserved in the agency space. Subscriptions do operate on a different set of KPIs and strategies, really, than a lot of traditional e-commerce. Although I would almost argue that a lot of e-commerce businesses should be thinking more like subscription businesses. And when I say KPIs, it really a lot of good subscription businesses focus in on CAC-to-LTV ratios. And that's fundamentally what the metrics you see brought over from places like SaaS and more venture-backed and growth-focused businesses, where your acquisition and lifetime value are really the two focuses for your business. And traditional e-commerce growth was always associated to top-line sales, and obviously that's super important. However, profitability over long term is kind of how you generate free-flowing cash and a valuable business that you can sit and sell at some point. That's why a lot of subscription businesses that have a really good MRR growth and profitable MRR growth, especially, can sell at a much higher multiple than businesses that don't.
hmm And I guess, how do you determine a business that's a good fit for subscriptions versus a business that isn't a good fit? Obviously, you sell couches, maybe not a lot of opportunity there for subscriptions. I don't know if you can sell like couch protection or I don't know, something like that. But generally speaking, there's certain business models that aren't good fits. And then there's the murky middle, I guess you
Mhm.
could say, right? Where it's like, is it a good fit? One of the brands that one of the founders of a brand that I know really well did underwear subscriptions
Mhm.
during the pandemic, specifically blew up into a multi tens of millions of dollars business. But after the pandemic kind of just completely fell off and nobody wanted to buy subscriptions for underwear anymore, I personally never would have thought of that in the first place.
Yeah.
But I guess, like, how do you determine who's a good fit, who's not a good fit? And then, like, how do companies in that murky middle kind of decide whether to jump into subscriptions or not?
Yeah, it's a really tricky question, because it does have that really great middle of like, well, so let's answer the obvious question first. If you have a consumable CPG product like a coffee, toilet
hmm
paper, contact lenses, that is toothpaste, anything that you go through continuously is a very easy subscribe and save model. There is also a model of obviously food subscriptions. We've seen meal plans and meal kits being a big industry that blew up through the pandemic. Then you have these boxes, curated boxes of items, so collectibles, the loot crate, and that kind of thing. Those are easy gimmies of creating a subscriber-specific experience. The trickier part, actually specifically called out couches. There is actually a great Canadian company called Pivot Furniture, and they literally help you do this for you. You basically subscribe to items effectively. So you could subscribe to a couch that you pay less than retail, but you hold it for as long as you want. And rather than buying a full couch,
Interesting.
you have it for a year or two. This is a great, like, for example, if you're just out of college, you want to furnish your new spot, but you don't want to pay $10,000 for a nice section, although you kind of have to invest into something and you're broke. It's like, you know what, let's just go on this subscription plan and you can fill like your whole place with it. So actually ex co-founders of Skip the Dishes. So
Hmm,
it's not so it is a cool
that's so
cool
cool.
little idea. And the idea here is that the real subscription value is that you're creating a service. So it is
Hmm.
not you're not paying per item, you're paying for a service of some kind. So it is a flat fee monthly, and you know exactly what you get. So, for example, you could do haircuts as a service, or lawn cutting as a service, or snow removal as a
Yeah.
service. So, because you wouldn't think that it would be an obvious fit, but it is something you need regularly, and fundamentally, to boil it down even further, I would say it really comes down to do you have a consumable product or not? Like, for example, coffins. You can't do a coffin on subscription. That would be an
Hmm.
easy no brainers. No,
Yep.
just don't even try. Uh, but but the idea that you would get, a snow removal subscription, that's fundamentally one of the OGs of
Hmm.
Canadian subscriptions, is
Yep.
you pay a kid down the street $20 a month or around $50 a month, and he just clears your snow whenever you need it on demand. So, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. And so help me understand a bit more, like, how does a company go through evaluating? And again, I don't think we need to talk about the toothpaste brand or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Everyone knows if I buy a tub of toothpaste, I'm out of it in like, 1 or 2 months, depending on the size, right? And
Yeah.
so easy subscription model there. But, like I said, like, how do I evaluate if I'm an underwear brand or a t-shirt brand, or I don't know, like something in the middle where it's like it's not super obvious that you need a
Yeah.
subscription for it? Like, how do they determine if it's a good fit or not?
Hmm. One easy way to get a gauge on this is just to look at your repeat rate, customer repeat rate. So Shopify gives you a very, very clear metric on how many of your customers
Hmm.
actually come back to place a second purchase. So if you look at the 3 to 6 month period, and you know that 50% of your customers are coming back to buy a second time, or um, uh, yes, that's a simple way
Yeah.
to think about it, because fundamentally what it means is that your product is good enough for people to repeat to buy on a repeatable basis, or to keep coming back to your brand. So one if you might not need to necessarily, although there are popular clothing and specifically underwear, socks, kind of, you could call them consumable because they are daily use items and you just kind of wear them out.
Yeah.
Although a lot of the value in that is not even convenience, but it's the curation and the novelty. So the value is kind of in being new, cool, and a
Hmm.
little special. It's basically a treat
Yeah.
for yourself. A lot of these subscriptions. But the other way that these brands could roll out a subscription. A subscription program is a membership model, Amazon style, where if you know you have a high repeat customer rate, you
Hmm.
could implement, and I've seen many brands do this very successfully, where you just ask for a membership fee for a year. Let's call it $100, $200, whatever it is. Depends on kind of your customer lifetime value. And then you get effectively maybe discounts on all items and free shipping on everything. So, and if you're a
Yeah.
diehard customer, you're kind of serving that niche to begin with. So if you think about developing a subscription product or subscription service from the from basically from the pull of the customer demand, is you're going to have repeat customers. They're going to buy from you 3, 5 times a year or more. What would they want? Would they want free shipping and discounts?
Hmm.
That's an easy one, right? So like, hey, $60 a year, you get these two things included, and then fundamentally that $60 purchase is all profitability effectively, and then you're guaranteeing the rest of the LTV by incentivizing these high quality customers. The And that's a staple of something like Amazon Prime. On the other hand, you could have a membership model where it's $200 a month, but it's a meal kit service, and you get 30% off or 25% off all the items you ever want, and you can just
Yeah.
some kind of preferred pricing. Think of it as a Costco style membership. So there's a lot of different ways to look at that business model and apply it. But and with clothing, I think with non-consumable items, membership models do seem to perform a little better. With food and beverage, it does seem like it's almost 50-50. Sometimes you do better on just trying to build a routine of supply. Basically, let's say if it's a butcher box, um, building a routine around using our specific, basically regular ordering our meat products and cooking them and eating them could be one way to do it, but also nesting a membership and getting the household to just utilize that membership as much as possible. Because as soon as you have a membership, you kind of want to get the most value out of
Mm.
it because you
Yeah.
paid that upfront cost. So there's so many ways to skin that cat. I would The biggest thing I would look for, though, to bring it back around, is that do you have a repeatable customer base where you are trying to build the long-term relationships and repeat business with your customers?
And how do you then go to that next calculation where it's like, okay, so now where we're at is okay, we're probably a good fit for a subscription business, but now I need to determine, is it worth it to me to
Mhm.
invest in subscription? There's costs associated with it, there's development, there's, if I'm using a recharge or something, they take a percentage of each transaction. Um, and then how far do I want to invest in this, right? If I have a repeat purchase rate of 30%, is it still like, how do you go about like calculating all of this to really understand what the investment should be into this in the first place?
Yeah, great question. And I'll preface it that it's, of course, different for every single business and vertical. However,
Mhm.
one thing that I've seen as a number that keeps popping up across different verticals and industries, be it food and bev, beauty,
Yeah.
subscription boxes, is that on reliably a subscriber places 2.5 to 3 times the number of orders of a one-time customer. That is what I've seen as a reliable metric across all of those. I think
Hmm.
what it really comes down to is by simple buyer psychology of Robbie Kelmer Bax recalls this the forever transaction. As soon as you sign up for a subscription consciously, so you choose to subscribe, or you know that you've signed up, the website pre-selects subscribe, gives you all the
Hmm.
benefits, and you go like, I'd be kind of stupid not to cancel anytime. It's free shipping. It's a lot cheaper. Let's just go with that. Um, if a customer chooses and signs up, in their mind, for the next 2 to 3 orders, they have stopped looking for any alternatives to this product. That honey, they're effectively creating a micro commitment for that time frame. Uh, Effectively, and that commitment is there as long as your brand keeps them happy.
Hmm.
Customers start churning as soon as they sign up. And churn fundamentally is the misalignment of reality and expectation. So the more for example, the more your marketing funnel will promise, the less you deliver afterwards, the more likely the customer is to churn on order two.
Yeah.
But if you manage those expectations really, really well, you can have a very, very long-term subscriber who's not just placing 2.5 to 3 orders, but actually places an order every month, and they're sticking around for years. There's a lot of businesses like that. So to me, the if you're building projections and thinking about what is the LTV difference between a one-time customer and a subscriber, and is it worth it for us? I've yet to see. I'll be honest. I've yet to see a brand that has had lower subscriber LTV than one-time customer LTV.
No.
It of course is, if you're trying to force a square peg into a round hole, like the coffin example. I don't think that it just falls flat on the idea level. However, if you feel like the value is there, it's definitely worth the test, because I've had many brands who've come to me and be like, well, for example, one brand I work with, Honey Packs, which is basically, it's a male enhancement honey. So think of it, and you go, okay, well, is this a regular product people buy or not? We looked because they didn't have a subscription program, but it was a consumable program. It's basically it's honey with a whole bunch of organic ashwagandha and all of these biohacking things put into organic honey. So And we looked at the repeat customer rates. It was about 35% of customers would come back and buy again, but they were a very new brand as well. They just launched within like the last 12 months. We launched a subscription program, and within a couple of months, they had $1 million in ARR. So, and the reason for that is because people did choose to subscribe. Especially like 30 to 40% of customers chose to subscribe on first purchase because we make that subscription order quite
Hmm.
good. And then we didn't force them into a stupid frequency of like every 3, 4 weeks. We timed it out to 8, 10, 12 weeks where you get a package and a much more consumable and a much more effective and consumable rate or agreeable consumption rate. So that really was again one of those examples where is do we know if there's a subscription fit here? It is a consumable product, but would this work? And yeah, and that simple rule of a subscriber was on average placing 3 times the value of a one-time customer. And if you're driving ad traffic to the product, and you're paying anywhere from $20 to $80 per customer or $100 a customer, if you can boost that subscriber LTV or customer LTV from $50 that where you'd say an average customer would place just one order, the $50 value, to $150 over the next 6 months, and that's just the average. That can be business changing for many businesses.
And I personally, like, I think it makes complete sense. But oftentimes, and it's the same conversation we have with mobile apps, right? Which is,
Mhm,
okay, yeah, sure, but that customer might have ordered again anyways, right? And
mhm,
how do you have that conversation with brands, and what would you say to them if they're like, okay, I get it. It's obvious a subscriber is going to have a higher LTV. There's no chance it's not going to happen on
mhm,
average. But that subscriber that subscribed probably would have come back again anyways. And what
mhm.
what is your typical argument? And how do you kind of, show the brand, okay, it's actually worth it to do it from a subscription model instead of just hoping that that customer is going to come back again anyways.
Um, it's a good question. I haven't really had any instances where the resistance to testing subscriptions was as high as, listen, but aren't we just discounting happy customers? Although I understand that logic.
Hmm.
To me, I think the early tests fundamentally just show that you could run a subscription program for, let's say, 3 to 6 months and just look at the data.
Yeah.
And maybe at that point it's sunk cost,
Hmm.
and if you just look at, well, it ran us for 6 months and we know that the LTV numbers are higher. However, generally, if you look at subscription programs, do get higher LTV than one-time customer repeat rates, than just like not having a subscription program. Although membership models, for example, where you don't put a customer on a set frequency of purchases and
Yeah.
ask for that LTV and effectively ask for that initial um, profit making purchase right off the hop, which is the membership purchase, which is whatever, $100 a year, costs you nothing, and then the customer can place as many orders as they want. Those are kind of neck and neck for being what actually drives more LTV and profit. So to me, I would say, kind of test at your own discretion. But generally speaking, I think the basic buyer psychology of when you opt in for a subscription, you stop considering other alternatives is kind of the secret. And it's on the brand to at that point retain a customer long term rather than on the customer to place another order.
So I'm a brand now. I determined I'm a good fit for subscription. I've determined that it's going to be worth it to me to invest in this, try this out at least, like you said, maybe 3 to 6 months, whatever. What are the best practices? What are the things that people often get wrong? And how do I make sure that I set up this subscription program properly so that I can actually validly test out the success of it?
Mhm. So if you wanted to build a subscription program from scratch and kind of avoid the most common pitfalls, the two things you need to focus in on is a good subscription. So good subscription offer, I think one thing I want to clear up before we even get to a setup is you have to have a good repeatable product that
Of
is going
course.
to
Yeah.
retain. So if you have a good product that's a good fit, most of the retention for a subscription program will be done with the product. However, how do you the other two pieces, you have to make sure to get the acquisition offer right for your for your initial subscription conversion. So what that means is typically let's call it a subscribe and save program. If it is supplements or supplements is an easy example. um, Very, very common thing that most businesses do when they just initially set up a subscription program is they slap a flat discount of 25% off on every order if you subscribe. Right?
Hmm.
Subscribe and save 25%. Easy, makes total sense, easy to explain, converts well. The issue with that is exactly what you brought up a little earlier is, are we discounting a ton on second, third, fifth, 10th, 20th order? And that's really what it comes down to. It's because what you should be doing instead is creating a heavier discount offer on the first order to incentivize a subscription. So, for example, um, giving away a free gift on the first purchase if you do a subscribe and save, and then discounting. So, for example, the first order can be 10% off subscription discount plus a $20 item that
Yeah.
you get if you subscribe. And then every single subsequent order is just 10% off or even 5% off. We've seen even really good subscription rates, even with a 5% off on every subsequent order discount. And the reason for that is, again, it's the job of the product to retain a customer. And I got this idea on this particular offer structure from Jordan Norducci, who worked at Momentous Supplements, and he's also big in the space. And shout out to Jordan. Um, and fundamentally, it is the job of marketing to convert a subscriber, and it's the job of the product to retain a subscriber. So don't be giving away too much on the retention side with that acquisition offer if you're really trying to focus on driving more subscribers. So that would be step number one. I would set up an offer that is attractive to try a subscription, but it's not
Hmm.
there to retain the customer on order 2, 3, 10, 12. So that would be piece number one. And the second piece is retention, and the focus on retention. Really, a really big one is, I think the most common mistake with retention is people think that they need to communicate as little as possible with their subscribers after they've subscribed, and because they're afraid if they're going to send reminders and talk to their subscribers, the subscribers are going to cancel. It's actually quite the opposite. If your conversation with the customer is actually educational and is valuable, which is not very difficult to do, is simply educate on your product. And most brands love to educate on the product. Most brands actually don't like selling too much.
Yeah.
If you can create an onboarding process that creates and an unboxing experience that creates a really nice first impression of your product. And when I say, it doesn't have to be a premium box and some cool looking inserts. It really needs to educate the customer on how to get the most out of that product on the first try, and effectively just improve that first product impression. That is the biggest lever you can do to guarantee order 2, order 3, order 4, right? So simple example, one of the brands I work with is so actually 2 examples. One is a dog. So think of it, if you're a dog owner, if you and you live in an apartment, this is every 2 weeks you get a patch of grass, effectively a patch of sod that comes to your house to replace and work as a pee pad for your dog when you're not at home. So for them, the trickiest part is actually getting new subscribers to reliably get their dog to use the pee pad. So for them, if you can't train the dog to use this patch of grass on the first go, you're losing a subscriber right off the hop.
Yeah.
So a lot what we found is, if you look at historic churn, the biggest reasons for churn is they couldn't, within the first couple of orders, they couldn't get the dog to train the dog. So all we focus in that onboarding process. So think of it, it's emails, it's unboxing documents, videos, and training calls. We make that very, very easy and top of focus for that post-purchase first 5 days, even before the lawn arrives. So it's like, hey, here's what you need to do to get the most out of your doggy lawn. You need to train your dog. Here's how to train it. Here's resources. Here's a free training call with an expert. Here's a video guide. Here's a checklist. So all of that is kind of included through the first emails and onboarding. And then you see training and success rates on first order go up. And obviously, second order, third order renewals are so much more likely to happen. Another example on the supplement side, you find out that a lot of customers have a subpar experience on the first order due to mismanagement of expectations. A lot of customers are expecting, and maybe marketing just said, hey, our supplements, improve quality. So say health, creatine or even protein or collagen,
Uh-huh.
hair, skin, health. However, they don't outline the timeline, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
customers will try it for 2-3 weeks and they're like, I didn't notice any difference. So one a really good example of this in managing expectations is, for example, fatty 15. It's an essential fatty amino acid. I believe that's what it was. Um, and they just say right in the conversion copy, as on the product pages, they tell you it takes about 16 weeks for 80% of customers to see results. So they're building at that expectation right off the hop, and they tell you you need to keep taking this for a while to really see big improvements in XYZ metrics. And then once you are mindful to those improvements, then it's a lot easier to say, oh, this actually worked, and um, and this makes sense to keep taking. So like I was saying before, on the retention side, the biggest cause for churn is that misalignment of expectations and reality. And if you can narrow that gap, and if you can manage those expectations in a much healthier way with that post-purchase onboarding, so it could be 4, 5, 6 emails that come after the order is placed, but before the order arrives.
Hmm.
That is kind of that key window, and same with the initial unboxing. Those I would say would be the two big things um, that you need to keep in mind: a good acquisition offer to start, and a retention that really focuses on placing that second order, and creating a really really awesome first unboxing and product experience.
It's funny because some of the advice you just gave is kind of contrary to a lot. So I've talked to a lot of subscription brands, like probably 100 subscription brands over the last like 2 years, let's call it.
Yeah,
And very often, like there's this large fear behind the brand owner when it comes to their subscriptions, where they're like, I don't want to communicate too much with my customers because it's going to remind them and maybe they'll cancel, or I don't want to
yeah,
provide easier access for customers to manage their subscriptions or cancel or anything because again they're much more likely to cancel. And
mhm,
you're kind of almost giving opposite advice in a way, which is over communicate, provide value, be in front of them consistently, and you know let the subscription kind of and the product speaks for itself. I'm
mhm,
assuming like the reason why these brand owners or e-commerce managers, whoever they are, is a little bit more fearful around that is because they might not fully believe the product is good enough or
yeah,
sticky enough
yeah.
to really keep that subscriber if they are providing all these different things to them. Essentially, would you say that's accurate?
Yes, I think most of the conversations that are in that realm generally come from business owners who are just starting out and they're
Hmm.
still worried about product market fit. And generally, the vibe about their business is that fearful vibe of like, is this? I know this is a house of cards because every small business at the beginning is a house of cards. And you're trying to find product market fit, and they're terrified that, oh, we have this person committed to a subscription. If we let them see their customer portal, they're going to go away. They're
Hmm.
not going to buy their product again. And one shift that I always incentivize for these business owners to do is reach out to look at the cohort of your highest valued customers. So look at your Shopify dashboard of customers. Create a segment that is, that place 6+ orders, for example, easy number. And then, so in this case, let's say subscribers. And then simply you can send them a survey asking them. That's also terrifying to some. It's like, we got to reach out to these people. They're going to cancel. They're
Yeah.
going to forget that they forgot that they have a subscription. They spent $2,000 with us because they forgot. Like
Mhm.
this kind of logic is
Well,
delusional, and it's
that's what
really
I
funny.
always say too, because
Yeah.
it's like I get it when it's a digital subscription to an extent, because that's very
Mhm,
easy to forget, right? If you're paying $10 a month for streaming subscription or some
mhm,
game or something, it's
mhm.
easy to forget because it's not in front of you and it just charges your
Doesn't get
credit card. You
delivered.
never see it. But on the product side, you're getting it every week or every month or every 60 days, whatever it is. It's impossible to forget forget
Yeah.
to an extent, right? Like it's there in front of you. It's taking up space in your apartment or in your house. You're picking it up, whatever it is. So it's a very different game being in the product space versus the digital subscription space, at least.
I think, yeah, on the subscriptions, on the service side, can't comment too much. I do think that um, generally the highest value LTV customers though will still benefit from communication.
Mhm,
And fundamentally, that's kind of how you want to cater your businesses to the best fit customers. Because quite frankly, if a reminder of an upcoming bill is coming through and the customer cancels their subscription, it's probably it wasn't a good fit for the product and the customer to begin with. So you want that data as a gauge for product market fit anyway. So
mhm,
one way to think about this: whenever customers cancel, it's actually the most valuable thing about that is the feedback they generate. And a lot of businesses actually fall a little short in the cancellation surveys in really digging down on what is a true cancel reason. So, for example, when people say I have too much product, which is a very common cancel reason for a lot of CPG brands, is it down to their consumption wasn't as I didn't use it as often as I'd like, or as often as I thought I would? And that comes down to, okay, well, did you like the product or not? Was there something about the product you didn't like? Um, Period. And that becomes incredibly valuable product feedback. Because think of it this way: if I'm a business, if I could get somebody to pay full price or even
yeah,
a slightly discounted amount to try my product 3, 4, 5 times and then tell me what's wrong with it, that's like the ultimate beta tester, right? It's like
mhm, yeah,
who else's advice or feedback is more valuable than a customer who's used your product on multiple orders and then gave you some feedback on why it's on what are the shortcomings. So to me, even in cancellation, subscribers are extremely valuable, and because a lot of that feedback just goes straight back to product development and also the acquisition strategy as well. So to me, the uh, I guess the fundamental, if we were to dig into the more fundamental rules of this, repeat business has been the backbone of all business and all relationships for forever, right? It's like it's as old as commerce itself. It's as old as money is. You know that repeat customers are better for your business than
yeah.
trying to find new ones all the time. And I think that's really why subscriptions generally are not a fad and they're not going to go away, because they make it easier to do repeat purchases for customers who are a good fit for your product. Period. So, and that's why you kind of see that 2.5, 3x multiplier reliably across subscribers over one-time customers as well.
It's funny because the way I hear you continually describing like subscriptions is literally the exact same language that we use when we're describing like mobile apps as well.
Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
exact same concept, right? Where you're optimizing for your best customers,
Yes.
you're providing them easier, more quick access to your product, making it easier for them to buy from you, trying to increase the LTV of those customers that do download the app. It's actually very funny. It's the same metrics that we see. We see a 2, 3 increase in lifetime value of those customers once they download the app. All the exact same
Yeah.
stories that you're telling there from a subscription lens. Um, I guess so now I'm a brand, I'm a good fit. I know my best practices. I know how to set this up now. What tools am I looking at? How am I evaluating those tools? What do you prefer?
Mm.
Yeah, walk me through it.
Yeah. So when it comes to the subscription tech stack, the stack that we work with the most, so I exclusively work with Shopify brands, so that's one thing. I
Yeah.
do think Shopify is the e-commerce platform to be on. That's one simple thing. The next is a question of a subscription app, and there are, and this is and one way for me personally, like a loaded question because I'm good friends with a lot of app founders because I work with multiple app teams on just like giving ideas on product feedback and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But however, there's I think currently, given that we're in the approaching Q4 of 2025, to me the top three apps currently that you should really evaluate as your best options would be Recharge would be number one. I'd say Loop and Skio would be the other two to take a look
Hmm.
at. The primary thing about Recharge has always been the biggest provider in this space, and the main reason for that is their entire team is very product focused, and you could say that for smaller apps as well. However, they also have the backing of a massive company, that is, let's say, effectively 10 times yeah, 10 times bigger than all the other competitors.
Yeah.
The innovation that they bring and just the speed of new feature rollouts that they bring is unlike the other two apps currently in my mind. So um, and quite frankly, a lot of it also comes down from top down. But the team that is building these products. So we can talk about feature for feature. I think feature for feature, the let's say Recharge is just leading on a lot of important pieces like analytics. A lot of people overlook that. Like a lot of these apps will do the same things. They'll do subscribe and save. They'll do surprise and delight flows. But the difference is in the minutia of the user experience or UX of the app itself. And I think Recharge has benefited from being a more mature product. And
Hmm.
because they have had a chance to do a version 2 of their entire user experience, where a lot of the upstart, basically the Loop, Skio, and everyone else is still working on their initial subscriber experience. So it's kind of the first draft of their product. Again, all of these people are doing incredible things. I think it is a very, very tough space to compete in. Um, but if you're evaluating what to look at, those are the three ones that I always keep a close eye on, just because those are the basically the most reliable and the most no-brainer features that you absolutely need to run a good subscription program and a scalable and a profitable subscription program.
Hmm.
You have to look at those three apps.
What would be the reason if I'm a brand to choose Skio or Loop or any of these other options? Like, why would I consider one of those instead of Recharge at this point?
Mhm. W- There's a couple of, so generally when evaluating, I would suggest looking at short-term reasons and long-term reasons. For short-term reasons, there are certain things with Skio that you might not get when it comes to with Recharge. Skio is again being and this is the same case for Loop and Skio. Both of those teams are smaller and they're effectively hungrier, and they will give you more. It's a lot easier to get priority support, for example,
Yeah.
and handheld onboarding, and get assigned to CSM at a lower threshold. So that could be one thing. However, one thing to keep in mind is just because it's easier to start doesn't mean it's easier to scale with an app like that. So the long term, I do believe Recharge has better analytics at both of those platforms. Primarily, it's just the depth of them, and they also give you the analytics that allow you to more easily understand LT. Like for example, it's still somehow requires manual exports to understand customer LTV on both Skio
Yeah.
and Loop. But where it's really comes down to just one dashboard on Recharge. So in my mind, there's small things like that create a Recharge over a long term makes for a better basically own business owner experience, as well as kind of leading in things like SMS, conversational SMS for managing subscriptions, which is like their concierge SMS, that's conversational AI, which is quite frankly a much more intuitive and better way to manage a subscription, because I would want to get a text message about an upcoming order and just be able to text back
Yeah.
conversation, whether I want to delay or do something along the lines of that. So they are the only ones offering that just as a sign of thinking a little more, just being more innovative in this space. Um, the other thing, so however, I mean, there's price in. So, for example, Loop would generally go with a better deal, but and I think they're kind of the value. And I think for me personally, it would be the value pick if you really wanted to um, look for kind of bang for buck, but also you'd still have to consider long-term costs. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a you, like I would say this: make a short list of demands that you need short term. If there's a feature, for example, that is better, for example, like you really need to build a box that is really robust. I would argue that Loop has a better build a box than Recharge and Skio. Um, and we've migrated numerous brands onto Loop's build a box. However, if you think about long term reasons like analytics, like good quality support, like an innovative product that an innovative product that keeps pushing and innovating features.
Hmm.
Recharge has been effectively over the last, I'd say, 12 to 16 months, has really been building that long term stack and moat really, really well.
I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, and this is just for me personally, because like if I went back like 1 or 2 years ago, you look at all like the biggest players in the Shopify ecosystem, Yotpo, Klaviyo,
Mhm.
Recharge, Rebuy, I guess were kind of like the four like the biggest players in the space, fastest growing, all these different things. And they all seem to be converging together into being like offering the exact same products. Yotpo went and added email SMS. Yotpo went and I believe they added subscriptions. I think Rebuy started doing subscriptions at one point, if I remember correctly. Recharge, like you said, is doing some like text messaging and customer communications and stuff now.
Mhm.
Klaviyo, I don't think they're doing loyalty anymore, but there was like some thoughts about it. There was definitely talk about it at some point. And it just seemed like all these guys were just converging to be the exact same tools. And that's just it seemed like that's where it was going. And logically, in some ways, it kind of made sense because they all raised tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars. And the XYZ space is only so big, the subscription space is only so big, the email space is only so big, and you have to expand outwards. But I'm curious to hear your opinions. And like Yotpo now, completely removed email and SMS from
And
being an
subscriptions
offer,
as well.
whereas and subscriptions too, right? So they backtracked on all of it. I'm curious like what your opinion is on like the future of this space and what all these different businesses are gonna kind of be doing now.
Boiled down to. I think the reason why we saw a lot of that push was that all of these platforms that we mentioned are all retention focused platforms. And
Yeah.
it's really a question is how much of the retention slice do you want to take? So, I mean, email is not an acquisition platform. Subscriptions are not an acquisition platform. Same thing with rebuy. I mean, again, the recharge or rebuy, it's in the name. It's about
Yeah.
returning customers. Um, and I think the reason why all these brands and companies are really aiming for that, because if we simply think about the largest companies in the world right now, they are acquisition businesses. Google, Facebook, right? These are advertising platforms and search and advertising platforms that drive the first purchase. That's really what they are,
Yeah.
right? The backbone of all of Google is Google Ads, and that's 70% of their revenue. And they are there to drive the first purchase. And incredibly, I mean, state of the art uh, system that is built to give customers the products and search results that drive high quality purchases. Um, and effectively think those are the biggest companies that we have, the alphabet companies at the top of the world
Hmm.
economic development. However, we know that simple math dictates that retention platforms actually, because they are facilitating order 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, they are the ones that process even more revenue. So I think that to me, at some point, we will have a conglomeration of a retention platform that will serve as a winner. And fundamentally, it really comes down to data, because all of these acquisition platforms are all data collecting and data companies. Facebook, Google, Amazon. So
And
on
then,
the other hand, if we can have just as much richness of retention data, which is fundamentally what this all comes down to, this is why, Recharge would go into email and SMS, because they want to have that channel, but also that data that enriches the customer experience. So it takes a user and effectively it adds a whole bunch of different touch points to their interaction with the brand, and it tracks proactive churn, for example, right? So I could say through Google, and I think this is kind of where this industry is going, where Google will draw, or your acquisition platforms of Meta and Google, they'll drive your initial purchase, and then platforms like Recharge, Klaviyo, Rebuy, um, uh, insert insert your favorite retention storehouse. They will have just as much data on the user based on their repeat purchases and based on their customer behavior. How often do they open the emails? Are they likely to churn? Not likely to churn?
mhm.
And fundamentally collect a lot of that profit on the back end. So that's why I think that industry is so hot and very competitive, and is only going to get more competitive. Um, I think we're going through that kind of awkward teenage phase where everyone tried to do something, and perhaps it didn't work out, and they backed out in some ways. But I do think that long term, the retention companies will actually overtake acquisition companies in potential evaluation, which is kind of nuts to think about. But yeah, that's kind of what my thinking is long term.
I kind of completely agree in a lot of ways, and that's what surprised me so much about Yotpo deprecating their email and SMS and
Mhm.
subscriptions and all these things. And, you know, I think the other learning lesson is that these things aren't as easy to build as people tend to think they are
Th-
too, right? Like,
That's That's the big takeaway. Exactly. It's not that
yeah,
that business model isn't valid, or it's not that that product isn't valid. It's a sign that
mhm.
this space is so competitive, and it's very hard to become the number one. And if you're number two or number three, it's very difficult to matter.
Yeah, it's just the market might not be big enough, especially even at this point, for there to be
That
enough
too.
players where it's valuable enough for some of these businesses to kind of pour resources into it. But it's definitely been interesting, like kind of sitting on the sidelines in my own box, just like viewing all these different guys try to compete against each other and then back out and then try to balance the relationship of we partner together in a lot of ways. You know, Yapo and Klaviyo integrate really well together. Then if you're competing against them at the same time, how does that partnership kind of work? And all the difficulties that come alongside that. So it's been pretty interesting to watch. Look, I guess last question, and we're kind of out of time here, but once a brand's launched their subscription program, how are you measuring their success and making sure that they're doing well with it, and it's worth it to continue kind of running that subscription program?
Totally. So the KPIs that we generally track very closely is your subscriber acquisition rate in checkout. So, how many of your current new customers come and become a subscriber? And this really determines whether you are a subscription first brand or not. Like,
Hmm.
do most of your first time purchasers choose a subscription or one time purchase? So, most brands, this is the unlock they see once they start running a subscription program for a little bit. Effectively, this is kind of the life cycle of most most businesses that launch a subscription brand. Go um, they only sell one-time products. Then they install a subscription app. They get 10, 20, 30% of customers choose a subscription on the first purchase. Maybe their offer is good or okay. Then they realize, they do the metrics and they look at it and they realize subscriber LTV is double or triple one-time customer LTV. And then they go, let's prioritize subscriptions. They pre-select subscribe and save to make the offer even better. They see it recurring growth and profitability increase because customers are now on average placing 2 or 3 orders, most new customers. Then they do the silly thing of only allowing for subscriptions and removing one-time purchases, period. Their customer acquisition costs go up. Their returning customers who would never buy a subscription get pissed. And then they go back to offering one-time and subscribe and save and letting customers choose, but still heavily prioritizing 60, 70% in subscriber acquisition. So that number is very, very key to the life stage and trajectory of that brand. So the number of subscriptions you acquire in checkout, um, or the percent of first-time customers that choose a subscription. Most brands that are healthy and looking at basically focusing in on subscriptions as the main source of growth, it's somewhere in the 50, 60, 70% mark. Although I work with brands that were in the 80s and 90s. Um, and the other piece is I like to simplify. LTV is a very, very simple, a lifetime of revenue, I should say, is a simple metric to look at and monitor. And fundamentally, what I would recommend is looking at least 12 months, putting a stopgap and putting a time frame on it. Um, Although, if you want to be a little smarter, you want to look at specifically contribution margin or your profitability on the customer. Um, and if you really wanted to, and this is kind of my contrarian view, but a very good leading indicator of churn and retention is first order satisfaction,
Hmm.
fundamentally. So if you can drive a very high subscriber opt-in on order one, say 60, 70, 80%, if you can drive a very high first order satisfaction after the first order arrived, customers reliably report, and this you can automate the survey, it's basically an NPS survey, reliably report 8.5, 9.5 out of 10 on that first order. The rest of the business kind of takes care of itself. I should say, because you know that they're very likely to place second order, third order, fourth order renewals, and those would be the easy metrics. And it's kind of funny that I would almost exclude the churn percentage out of this, because it depends. Churn percent, I've seen. It's like, what's normal? There's that
Yeah.
question of like, is 2% good? Is 10% good? Is 5% good? And it's very hard to tie that number to top line revenue. Um, one other way to look at, instead of looking at churn, I advocate to looking at average order count, which is the number of orders a customer places over a time frame. So let's say 12 months. And if you really wanted to um, bake it all down to three simple key metrics to track, is the number of subscribers you have, A, the average order value that they place, B, and the number of orders they place over a year, C. And you multiply all of those one by the other, and then you get your total top line revenue. And then you know that if I want to grow this business, I have three levers to pull. I can either add more customers to the funnel, I can get them to place more on every single order, or I can get them to place more orders over a course of a year. And each one of those will drive just as much top line revenue, 35% increase to more customers, 35 top line sales up. 35% higher average order count, 35% higher top line sales count.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's effectively what I would try to boil it down to, but still working on really boiling it down to like one number. And that's primarily the main reason why brands work with me directly, is because there's a lot of numbers to look at and things to focus on.
If someone wants to find you or wants advice on, their subscription business or starting one from scratch,
Mhm.
how should they reach out? Where can they find you?
Easiest way to find me would be on LinkedIn, Andriy Rudnyk, AndriyRudnyk. I post there semi-regularly, as more of a way to stay top of mind and relevant, rather than try to, and also just share ideas that I actually think worth sharing. And if you wanted to also look up the agency and the work that I do, it's goodsubscription.agency, or if you just look up Good Subscription Agency, I'm sure to find.
Thanks so much for doing this, man. Have a good rest of your day.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Eric. I appreciate it. It was a ton of fun.